Welcome to Deloitte's Debrief, test webcast series in Asia Pacific. Our webcast today is from our Geography Update series and is titled Hong Kong SAR Budget 2022-23 Commentary. My name is Polly Wen and I'm a tax partner based in Deloitte, China. I have the pleasure of hosting today's webcast. I have three speakers with me today. They are Alfred Chen, Raymond Tang, and Roy Fang. We are based in Deloitte, China. You may access our bios on the left side of the screen. Before I introduce the agendas for today's webcast, I'd like to take a moment to highlight some of the features of our webcast console. First of all users are on listen-only mode. If you have any content-related questions, you can submit it at any time in the Q&A box at the bottom right of the screen. We will do our best to respond to your questions during the presentation. Second, all PC users can maximize or minimize each box at your convenience during the webcast. You may also explore the icons at the bottom of the screen. If you want to download today's slides and related publications, please go to the Downloads and Link box. On the other hand, mobile device users can view the slides and answer the survey on the screen. Thirdly, if you require an attendance record for this event, you can download your CPD certificate by clicking the Request CPD icon at the bottom of the webcast console. Now, let me give you an overview of the topics we will discuss today. To start with, we will give you a highlight of this year's budget and a brief summary of the new budget measures. And then we will share with you some measures in the budget to promote the development of Hong Kong capital market. And then we will have some ESG-related measures to realize carbon neutral in Hong Kong in the long run. And then we will introduce the tax incentive for financial and maritime and port sectors. Finally, we will have the new international tax standard and introduction of domestic minimum top-up tax in Hong Kong. We'll have a Q&A section at the end. Now over to you, please, Alfred.
Thanks, Polly. Good afternoon. Financial Secretary Mr. Paul Chan has made his sixth budget speech, and we are not sure whether it is his last one. As the Chief Executive may change next year, the Management Committee will also be changed. Over the last 2 years, Hong Kong has experienced a very difficult time with the negative effects from the international political tensions and the COVID-19 epidemic. It is not surprising that the government will generate a fiscal deficit for the fiscal year 2021 and 22. In fact, Financial Secretaries estimated that the government will have a fiscal surplus of 90.8 billion. When compared with the original estimation made by Financial Secretary in February 2021 of 101.6 billion, there is a substantial amount of difference of around Hong Kong dollars 120 billion. What are the major reasons for the differences? There are three major reasons. The increase in land sales revenue is mainly attributable to the sale of a premium commercial land in Central, which generate an additional revenue of Hong Kong dollars 50 billion. For increase in profits tax, it is mainly due to the time lag on tax collection. The government would collect the tax for the year of assessment 2019 and 2020 in the year of assessment 2020 and 21, in which the profits tax for 2019 and 20 was subject to less impact from the epidemic. Regarding the decrease in government expenditure, you may wonder why there was a decrease in expenditure. While we are talking about the government should adopt an expansionary fiscal policy to fight against the epidemic, the government did spend a lot, including the implementation of two significant measures in 2020 and 21, the cash payout scheme and also the employment support scheme. And these two measures cost the government of Hong Kong dollars 190 billion. With the stabilizations of the epidemic during the second half of year 2021, the government implemented one significant relief measures, giving out electronic consumption vouchers in 2021 and 22. and it cost the government only 40 billion, and hence the government expenditure decreased. To run through the figures in the current year, let's take a look on the forecast in medium one. Next slide, please. Operating deficit. As indicated by the Financial Secretary, the government will maintain expansionary fiscal policy to strengthen the economy and invest for the future. And they will spend more. Hence, the Financial Secretary foresees that the government will continue to have a deficit for next year. Capital financing. The government would like to take advantage of the low interest rate and to promote Hong Kong as an international bond market. It intends to issue more green bonds in the upcoming years, around 35 billion per year. It will generate more revenue to the government. Let's look at the years marked with star. The amounts include deposits from issuance of green bond of 35 billion. If we take away the loan amount, the government will be in a deficit or break-even positions. Until 2025 and 26, the government will resume its surplus position. For the fiscal reserve, it will be kept at a level of 900 billion, with a trend of slight increment. In terms of number of months of government's expenditure, it will be maintained at a level of 60 months. Someone may ask whether this is sufficient or not. There's no rule of thumb. Even under the impact of epidemic, the government can still maintain the fiscal reserve at around 29% of the GDP for most of the years. And so far, there was no significant issues coming out. I think we can say this is relatively healthy. Next slide, please. Let's look at the forecast on GDP. Financial Secretary estimated that the GDP growth rate for 2022 will be in the range of 2% to 3.5% in real term, while the GDP growth rate for the next 4 years will be at 3% in real term. Whether it is achievable, we are quite optimistic on it. As we refer to the figure in 2021, when the local epidemic situations became quite stable in the last 3 quarters of 2021, the quarterly GDP shows a strong pickup of over 4.5% to 7.6% in real term. As long as the 5th wave of the epidemic can be gradually put under control, and the resumption of quarantine-free travel, as well as the stimulus effect of the fiscal measures, we forecast that Hong Kong's economy will recover with a mild and steady growth. Next slide, please. For the next sections, I'm going to talk through the key proposed measures announced in the budget speech. I would like to emphasize that some of the proposed measures are subject to reading by LECO and the lawmaking process. You will receive further updates from Deloitte once the law is enacted. To start with, let's talk about the measure proposed for the non-commercial sector. The government is offering 100% tax reductions with a cap of Hong Kong dollars 10,000 for each of the individual taxpayers for 2020 and 21. Same as last year, the Financial Secretary has proposed a measure to encourage and boost local consumption through giving out electronic consumption vouchers in installment with a total value of 10,000 Hong Kong dollars to each Hong Kong permanent residents and new arrivals aged 18 or above. And the last year's amount is 5,000 only. Such measure is under debate, as the epidemic has lasted for more than 2 years. Most of the businesses in problem are facing the liquidity or going concern problem. They are in shortage of cash to pay out their normal expenses in order to maintain the business. Such measures could not address their immediate need, so many businesses are urging for cash payout scheme or employment support scheme. Under the current tax regulations, certain property owners can enjoy tax deductions on mortgage loan interest, capped at $100,000. To be fair, in order to ease the rental burden of individuals who are not owners of domestic properties, we have suggested Financial Secretary to introduce a tax deductions on rental expenses on domestic property with a cap of 100,000 for many years. Finally, Financial Secretary has accepted our proposal this year. Last year, in order to provide an extra financing options for the unemployed, Financial Secretaries suggest setting up a special 100% loan guaranteed for individual schemes. The maximum loan amount per application is 6 times of the average monthly income, or 80,000 Hong Kong dollars, whichever is higher. The maximum loan amount per applicant is now increased to 9 times of the average monthly income during the employment, and subject to a ceiling increase to 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. In addition, wage concessions for domestic properties and electricity subsidy will also be given out. Next slide, please. To alleviate the burden of tax-paying business and commercial sectors, Financial Secretaries has proposed a number of measures including, similar to the tax relief on individual taxpayer, the government is offering 100% tax reductions with a cap of $10,000 for each of the corporate taxpayers. The reductions will be reflected in the final tax payable for 2020 and 2021. To provide a better support of the liquidity positions of different SME, the government tried to enhance the existing SME financing guarantee scheme by extensions of applications and repayment period, increment on loan ceiling, and extensions of the maximum durations of principal moratorium to end of October 2022. Same as last year, the government continues to provide the following waiver and concessions, including providing wage concessions for 2022 and 23, waiver of business registration fees for 22 and 23, waiver and concessions of the existing 34 groups of government fees and charges for 12 months. This can definitely provide some financial relief to business in Hong Kong. However, one thing is to note that these measures are not new. The new measure is to introduce new legislation to prohibit lenders from terminating the tenancies or not providing service to tenants of specified sectors for failing to settle rents on schedule, or taking relevant legal actions against them. The government emphasized that it will only be a temporary measure lasting for 3 months, may extend for another 3 months if needed. After that, the law will be abolished. Next slide, please. Apart from the measures mentioned above, next slide, please. Apart from the measures mentioned above, there are 2 eye-catching measures. With the aim of meeting up the continued increase in government expenditure, the government is actively looking for ways in generating more revenue. And last year, Financial Secretaries proposed to increase the stamp duty rate for transfer of Hong Kong stock from the current rate of 0.2% to 0.26%. And the result is very satisfactory. And this year, Financial Secretaries proposed a change on the rating system. It proposed to charge progressive rate at 5%, 8%, and 12% rateable value on rateable value, starting from 2024 and 25. And under the existing rating system, we charge the rate at a flat rate of 5%. And the main purpose, of course, is to boost up the government revenue. And in view that many businesses have been or will be closed down, in particular the retail business and restaurants, the government promised to create 30,000 time-limited jobs through the 6.6 billion earmarked in anti-epidemic fund. This is the end for my part. I will pass the floor to Raymond to discuss about the other measures. Over to you, Raymond.
Good afternoon. I would like to share with you the measures in the budget speech to promote the development of the Hong Kong capital market. So before I go into the details, let us take a look to the development and achievement of the Hong Kong capital market in 2021. As we can see, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange recorded an average daily turnover of 167 billion last year, with an increase of 29% as compared to 2020. We can see The higher turnover occurred in Q1 and Q2 last year, while it gradually reduced in Q3 and Q4. As you know, as Alfred has mentioned, there was a stamp duty increase for the transfer of shares, which is from 0.2% to 0.26%, as mentioned by Alfred. I cannot comment whether or not the drop of the turnover is related to the stamp duty change, but definitely the market sentiment in the Hong Kong stock market was not good last year. Second, the IPO fundraising, as you may recall, Hong Kong was top 3 globally in early years. But in 2021, IPO fundraised in Hong Kong amounts to approximately $330 billion only. Hong Kong is 4th largest IPO center in the world last year. And we can see most of the sizable IPO, for example, those big tech company, they came to Hong Kong in the first half of 2021. Last year, we also see the Hong Kong Stock Exchange allowed the weighted voting right structure and those companies, which is a pre-revenue or pre-profit biological corporation, to be listed in Hong Kong. We can see under the new scheme, 70 companies have listed in Hong Kong, and it raised more than 570 billion Hong Kong dollars. Last but not the least, we see a lot of the China concept stock companies to return from US to Hong Kong for secondary listing. Next slide, please. So in the budget speech this year, there are measures to enhance the Hong Kong capital market development. First of all is the introduction of the Special Purpose Acquisition Company. We call it Hong Kong SPAC this year. What is a Hong Kong SPAC? It is a blank check company, and after the listing, it needs to apply the fund raised to undergo an acquisition within 2 years. Aquila SPAC will list in Hong Kong this week, but it is for those professional investors only. What is a professional investor? It is clearly defined in the Security and Future Ordinance. And so it is not for those retail investors to purchase it. Second, the budget continues to attract the China concept stock company to return to Hong Kong. As you can see, it is a very hot topic last week. The US SEC took action with an intention to delist some of the China concept stock currently listed in the US. And 5 of these companies were announced last week, and they have to submit evidence to show that they can comply with the listing requirement in the US before the end of this month. We expect more China concept stock will appear on the list, and we hope the relevant regulator will reach a consensus to resolve the deadlock issue as soon as possible. Also, in the budget, it is mentioned that those large-scale advanced technological enterprises, they may require substantial capital for their research and development purpose. But as they are not profit-making, they currently do not qualify for listing in Hong Kong. As you may know, the minimum aggregate profit threshold has been increased from 50 million to 80 million. That means a 60% increase last year. So the minimum aggregate profits for the first 2 financial years of the track record period will be 45 million plus final financial year of 35 million. So the threshold has been increased. So the Securities and Futures Commission and the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, they are asked to review to enhance the main board listing rule so as to facilitate the capital raising of these large-scale advanced technology companies. But in the budget, there is no clear definition of what is called large-scale advanced technology company. So we have to wait and see whether or not it will be using a wider concept to apply for this rule, or it is a very narrow to just facilitate a few companies only. Next slide, please. And the renminbi internationalization is a key to help strengthen the competitive advantages of Hong Kong as being an international financial center. The budget also have measures to enhance the internationalization of the renminbi. First of all, First is to explore ways to expand the two-way flow of those cross-boundary renminbi funds. Whether or not there will be a relaxation of the remittance advice, we have to wait and see. And second is to promote development of offshore renminbi products, such as renminbi wealth management products and bonds. The third is to allow the stock to be traded via the southbound trading of the stock connect to be dominated in renminbi. Currently, the southbound trading of stock connect is dominated in Hong Kong dollars. As we can see for those stock or exchange traded funds which have both Hong Kong and renminbi counter, we can see the turnover in the renminbi counter is very little. As such, the budget proposed to introduce the market maker system for the renminbi counter for these stock transactions through the southbound trading of stock connect. And in order to facilitate for the market maker arrangement, it is suggested to waive the stamp duty on the stock transfer incurred by the market maker for these renminbi transactions. Next is to explore the enhancement for the cross-boundary wealth management connect scheme in the GBA. Now, there's a quota for this wealth management connect scheme. It is 181 billion Hong Kong dollar for northbound and southbound respectively, and it is restricted to those low and medium risk products. Whether or not there will be relaxation for the risk level, or whether or not they will increase the quota, we have to see the detailed implementation later. And last but not the least, as an international financial center, Hong Kong has launched the A-share index future and continue to explore other risk management products. As we can see, these kind of products will help the investor to have sufficient tools to hedge their renminbi investment. This future contract is a benchmark future contract. Before, it is dominated in Singapore. And now, as the Hong Kong Stock Exchange has offered such product, we believe it is welcomed by the investor to hedge their renminbi investments. Next slide, please. We talk a lot about the capital market for stocks. Let's see about the bond market, which is also a common investment by those investors. In the budget, it is said the Steering Committee on Bond Market Development and will enhance the market landscape, market infrastructure, and the market promotion to further develop the Hong Kong bond market. There are some ways to do so. First of all, to expand the issuance of various types of bonds, such as green bond, for enhancing the ESG, which is a very hot topic now. Second is the issuance of the renminbi bond for renminbi internationalization. And the third is the issuance of the Hong Kong bond with longer tenure under the government bond scheme for formation of local yield curve. Also, it is suggested to have an upgrade for those central money makers unit, which is a major central security depository platform in Asia. Also, the relevant bureau is working on the development on an electronic bond trading platform to stimulate and facilitate those secondary transactions of bond and expand the investment base. As we can see, most of the bond trading is now traded over the counter. We believe it is a positive move to invest for those investors who are interested in the bond market trading. Next slide, please. In the budget, it is proposed to have issuance of different bonds in the coming financial year. First of all is the issuance of I-bond. It is planned to issue no less than 15 billion of inflation-linked retail bonds. We call it I-bonds in the next financial year. I-bond is publicly traded in Hong Kong Stock Exchange, which has a 3-year tenor, and the interest is paid semi-annually and is linked to the inflation in Hong Kong with a minimum interest rate of 2%. Second is the issuance of the silver bond. The government is planned to issue no less than 35 billion of silver bond in next financial year. It is also a 3-year bond and paid interest semi-annually. But unlike the I-bond, the interest is a bit different. As we can see, the minimum interest is 2% for those silver bonds due in 2019 and 2020, and it is 3% for the bond due 2021 and 2022. For the bond due in 2023 and 2024, it is 3.5%. But however, it seems that even though it seems that the interest rate is much higher than the I bond, but there is a transfer restrictions. There is no secondary market and only allowed early redemption, and it is only for those elderly in Hong Kong only. Last but not the least is the issuance of the green bond. It is planned to issue no less than 10 billion of retail green bond in next financial year. Suppose it is announced to issue the first retail green bond in the last year financial budget. And suppose it is originally issued in early March 2022, that means this month. But as you may know, the COVID-19 situation in Hong Kong is very severe, so the issuance is postponed. Details is not available in the meantime, but we believe the issuance of green bond can promote the ESG and the sustainability in Hong Kong and help to enhance the bond market in Hong Kong as well. So this is the end of my part. So I pass to my colleagues who will talk about the environmental, social, and governance, which is related in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Here comes the ESG-related measures in the budget to realize carbon neutral in Hong Kong in the long run. The Hong Kong government announced Hong Kong's Climate Action Plan 2050 in October 21. This plan set out the zero carbon emission, livable city, and sustainable development. It also outlines the strategies and targets for combating climate change and achieving carbon neutrality. This year's budget set out various measures aiming to achieve this goal. The three major sources of carbon emission in Hong Kong are electricity generation, transport, and waste. Therefore, the decarbonization strategies in Hong Kong focus on these areas. Various targets and measures are adopted. For net zero electricity generation, the Hong Kong government targets to cease using coal for daily electricity generation. It targets to increase the share of renewable energy in the fuel mix, also try to use the new energy and strengthen the cooperation with neighboring regions. For energy saving and green buildings, the Hong Kong government defined green buildings as designed, built, renovated, operated, and reused in an ecological and resource-efficient manner to meet certain objectives. Green buildings consume less electricity and are growing popularity in private sectors as well. The Hong Kong government is continuing the development of green buildings through sustainable building design, the use of innovative construction methods, and climate resilience with innovative solutions. For green transport, the Hong Kong government promotes electrification of vehicles and ferries, develop new energy transport and measures to improve the traffic management. The Hong Kong government tried to boost private electric vehicle registration in Hong Kong and reduce the number of new registrations of traditional engine and hybrid vehicles by various means. For instance, in Hong Kong, there will be a tax concession for first registration of electric vehicles, a 100% profits tax deduction on acquisition of electric vehicles, free charging service for electric vehicles in public car parks, as well as subsidizing the installation of electric vehicle chargers. For waste reduction, the Hong Kong government will further promote waste reduction and recycling, and expect to implement waste charging and regulate disposable plastic tableware in phases. It also targets to develop adequate waste-to-energy facilities in order to reduce reliance on landfills of waste disposal from the community. Over the years, the Hong Kong government allocated many resources in the budget to move towards the zero carbon goal. This year's budget is no exception. Various measures and plans are introduced in this year's budget, which shows the government's determination to achieve the zero carbon goal. One of them is to develop Hong Kong as a green finance center. Green finance has become a hot topic among the investment community in the recent years, and the Hong Kong government has been active in building up the foundation for Hong Kong's green finance development. One of the focus areas is green bonds, the largest form of green finance. Now we have a polling question here. To what extent do you know about green bond? We have 4 options here. First, I'm familiar with green bond. I have even taken part in the green bond related activities such as insurance, advisory, compliance review, etc. Second, I have heard about green bond and really familiar with the details. Then, I have heard about green bonds, but not familiar with the details and would like to know more about this. And then, no, I have not heard about green bond and not interested to know about it. While we are waiting for the results to come in, I would like to share with you some statistics. The Hong Kong government launched the Government Green Bond Program in 2018, and it took the lead in arranging the issuance of green bond to demonstrate the government's support for sustainable development and development of green finance in Hong Kong. The Government Green Bond Program targeted at global institutional investors, and over the years, over $7 billion equivalent of green bonds were issued under this program. In particular, a 30-year US dollar denominated green bond and a 20-year euro denominated green bond were issued, both of which are the first issuance among the Asian governments. Also, the Shenzhen municipal government successfully issued RMB green bonds in Hong Kong. It set a leading example for GBA cities to make good use of Hong Kong market for green financing. Now, here come the answers. Thank you for the participation. It seems that most of our participants would like to know more about green bonds, and we know about it. Thank you. As I said, the Hong Kong government is determined to develop Hong Kong as a green bond center. In this year's budget, the government commit to issue green bonds totaling $4.5 billion equivalent. As mentioned by Raymond, the Hong Kong government is also planned to issue the first retail green bonds, though the timetable may be a little postponed due to the pandemic situation at present. It will further enhance the role of Hong Kong as an international green finance hub. Green bond is a debt instrument with the proceeds clearly specified for green use. So both the issuer and the investors should consider the tax implication in issuing the bond or making the investment. From the perspective of investor, generally, if a company invests in a bond listed in Hong Kong, the relevant interest income generated here in Hong Kong listed bonds are taxable here. For green bonds issued by Hong Kong government under a special session, the interest income is tax exempt in Hong Kong. Of course, if you are an overseas investor and you would like to invest in this Hong Kong listed bond, you need to consider the tax implication in your local jurisdictions. For green bond issuer in Hong Kong, a proper planning is even more important, as it may significantly affect the overall tax efficiency. In particular, if the proceeds of the green bond is used for intra-group cross-border green financing. For instance, how to press the proceeds or the loan from the bond issuer to the group company that used the proceeds, how to determine the intercompany interest rate, are there any deduction of interest expense at the local jurisdictions, how to maximize the interest deduction, any withholding tax of interest income, any available treaty to reduce the tax on interest, and how to qualify for the treaty application. That's a lot of questions you need to carefully consider and plan ahead. As it could be quite complicated, I would suggest you consult tax professionals if you have a plan in mind. In addition to taking the lead in issuing green bonds, the Hong Kong government also encouraged commercial sectors to go for green financing by launching the Green and Sustainable Finance Grant Scheme. Bond issuance involves certain costs, and the issuance of green bond even involves quite significant compliance costs. This scheme provides subsidy for eligible bond issuers and loan borrowers to cover the expenses on bond issuance and the external review services. This scheme will last for 3 years and consists of 2 tracks, covering first, the general bond insurance costs, which include the bond insurance expense such as arrangement costs, legal costs, audit, listing fees, etc. for the eligible first-time green and sustainable bond issuer. And then second, external review costs, which cover the transaction-related external review fees, such as the pre-insurance external review and post-insurance external review for all reporting for the eligible green sustainable bond issuers and loan borrowers, including the first-time and repeated issuers and borrowers. Full cost of eligible expenses paid to recognized external reviewers with a cap of 800,000 Hong Kong dollar per issuance will be provided to each applicant under this scheme. And to further promote private enterprise in obtaining green financing, in this year's budget, the minimum loan size under this scheme is reduced from 200 million Hong Kong dollar to 100 million Hong Kong dollar in respect of the application of subsidies, covering the external review costs under this scheme. It further demonstrates Hong Kong government's determination to promote green debt in private sectors. This year's budget continued to allocate funding to Green Tech Fund and charging facilities for electric vehicles. For Green Tech Fund, there will be an extra funding of 200 million Hong Kong dollar. Green Tech Fund was set up by the Hong Kong government to fund the R&D projects which help Hong Kong decarbonize and enhance environmental protection. This year's budget set aside 200 million Hong Kong dollar extra funding to this fund. Designated local public research institute, R&D center, or local company may apply for the Green Tech Fund. The priority of Green Tech Fund is given to projects with clear themes of decarbonization and energy saving, green transport, waste management, as well as air and water quality. For charging facilities of electric vehicles, there will be an extra funding of 1.5 billion Hong Kong dollar. It is to support the wider use of electric private cars. The Hong Kong government will continue to provide subsidies in enhancing the electric vehicle charging infrastructure and network. That's all of my sharing today. Over to you, please, Roy.
Thanks, Polly. First, I will go through the proposed tax incentive related to financial services industry, which is a core industry sector in Hong Kong as an international finance center. Since last budget, the government has been working with the asset management sector to review the tax arrangement for family office, which is a fast-growing and increasingly important sector in the asset management space. In 2020, it is estimated that there were over 520,000 ultra-high net worth individuals around the world, with over 22% of them in Asia. The Assets and Wealth Management Activities Survey 2020, published by the Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, has recorded a 46% year-on-year increase of AUM to over US $260 billion in 2020 in Hong Kong's private banking and private wealth management business attributed to family office and private trust clients, which also shows that family office is a fast-growing engine in the asset management space. In recent years, the Hong Kong government has stepped up their efforts to attract more family offices to set up and operate in Hong Kong. Such efforts include providing clarity on the licensing obligation of family offices, providing one-stop services for family offices interested in setting up a presence in Hong Kong, etc. From a tax perspective, it is, however, worth noting that the Unified Fund Exemption Regime, which we often refer to as UFE, would unlikely apply to the investment vehicle of a single family office, because such vehicle is unlikely to satisfy the definition of a fund under the UFE. While certain investment income, such as gains derived from offshore listed securities, are clearly offshore source and not subject to tax in Hong Kong, the source rule for income or gains derived from private equity or venture capital type of investment is not that straightforward. The lack of certainty in tax position for those investment vehicle of a single family office may discourage them from setting up and operating in Hong Kong, especially when comparing to Singapore, which offers tax exemption such as the 13X exemption for family offices. Therefore, to enhance Hong Kong's competitive advantage from a tax perspective, the budget proposed to provide tax exemption for eligible investment vehicles that are managed by single-family office in Hong Kong, provided certain conditions are satisfied. Based on the consultation paper, which was released last week, we hereby summarize the key requirements for the tax exemption under this new regime. There are two key terms here: Family Investment Holding Vehicle, FYHV, and Single Family Office, SFO. FIHV could be a corporation, partnership, or trust, which is incorporated inside or outside Hong Kong. The central management and control of FYHV must be exercised in Hong Kong in order to get the tax exemption. All the issue share interests of the FYHV must be exclusively and beneficially owned, directly or indirectly, by one or more individuals who are connected persons of the same family. This requirement shall be stipulated in the Articles of Association or constitutive documents of the FYHV. In order to fulfill the policy objective of bringing investment management and related activities to Hong Kong, the assets of FYHV must be managed by an SFO in Hong Kong. SFO must be a private company incorporated in or outside Hong Kong, but exercising its central management and control in Hong Kong. It must be exclusively and beneficially owned, directly or indirectly, by the single family holding the FYHV, and must not provide investment management services to entities other than the FYHV. Profits tax exemption would apply to FYHV in respect of qualifying transactions and transactions incidental to the carrying out of the qualifying transaction, subject to a 5% threshold. It is expected that the definition of qualifying transactions would mirror those under the UFE, which basically include investment in listed securities and private equities subject to fulfillment of certain conditions, such as the 2 years holding period tax, etc. Besides, for the tax exemption to apply, the aggregate average AUM of the FYHV shall be at least 240 million Hong Kong dollar. Similar to other tax incentives in Hong Kong, such as the carry interest tax exemption, ship leasing exemption, etc., there are substantial activity requirements to ensure the core income-generating activities of FYHV are carried out in Hong Kong. To satisfy the substantial activity requirement, it is proposed that there should be at least 2 full-time employees in Hong Kong, and an annual operating expenses of Hong Kong dollar 2 million incurred in Hong Kong for carrying out the investment management activities for the FYHV. It is worth noting that, for administrative purposes, the maximum number of FYHV which are managed by the same SFO and will benefit from the proposed regime shall not exceed 50. Eligible FYHV is required to make an irrevocable election for relying on the tax exemption under the new regime. Next slide, please. The budget also suggested that there will be tax incentive for maritime and port sector. Currently, there are already certain tax incentives for maritime and port sector, which include profits tax exemption for qualifying ship lessors, and either 0% or 8.25% tax rate for qualifying ship leasing managers in Hong Kong. For ship operators, Section 23B of the Inland Revenue Ordinance allows income from international shipping business to be excluded from profits tax in Hong Kong. To echo the government's plan to develop high value-added maritime business services as set out in the 2021 policy address, the budget proposed a half tax concession, which means a tax rate of 8.25%, with a view to attracting more maritime enterprise, such as ship registration, ship finance and management, marine insurance, and maritime legal and arbitration services to establish a presence in Hong Kong. Next slide, please. The last session of today's debrief is on Hong Kong's response to BEPS 2.0. As a recap, Hong Kong, together with the other 136 inclusive framework members, have agreed to the 2-pillar solution to address tax challenges arising from digital economy as proposed by the OECD under the BEPS 2.0 initiative. While Pillar 1 only impacts MNE with global turnover above 20 billion euros and profitability above 10%, which are essentially those super big groups. More industry focus is put on Pillar 2, which would impact a wider group of multinational enterprise, which we refer to as MNE, with an annual revenue of 750 million euros or more. Under Pillar 2, if the effective tax rate on a jurisdictional basis is lower than 15%, which is the global minimum tax rate determined under Pillar 2, top-up tax will be collected at the ultimate parent level under the Income Inclusion Rule (IRR), or at other constituent entity levels under the Undertax Payment Rule (UTPR). IRR and UTPR are collectively referred to as a Global Enter-Based Erosion Rule, the GLOBE rule. IRR will come into effect in 2023, while UTPR will come into effect in 2024. Here comes our second polling question for today. The question is, have you assessed whether your MNE group will be impacted under Pillar 2 and how ready you are? There are 4 choices. My MNE group will be impacted and we are assessing the impact. My MNE group is likely to be impacted, but we haven't yet assessed. My MNE group will not be impacted. And the last choice is, I don't know if my MNE group will be impacted. While we are waiting for the polling results, let me give you all a quick overview of what are the responses from some other countries or jurisdictions in relation to Pillar 2. EU has previously issued a directive to EU member states on Pillar 2 in relation to the implementations of IRR and UTPR, which also says that domestic minimum tax is an option. UK has issued consultation paper on the implementation of Pillar 2, in which IRR will take effect from the 1st of April 2023. UTPR and domestic minimum tax will take effect from 1st of April 2024. Ireland will also have domestic minimum tax of 15% for MNE which has turnover of 715 euro or more, while taxpayer below this threshold is subject to the standard 12.5% tax rates in Ireland. Singapore will explore a top-up tax called minimum effective tax rate to bring ETR of in-scope MNE in Singapore to 15%. UAE, which currently does not have corporate income tax regime, will also introduce a 9% corporate income tax starting from 1st of June 2023. Now let's look at the polling result. It seems we have quite a balanced result here, and with more than 30% responses saying, I don't know if my MNE group will be impacted. So now let's see what the budget says about Pillar 2 from Hong Kong perspective. In the budget, the Hong Kong government has announced some key points regarding Hong Kong's response to Pillar 2. First, the Hong Kong government reaffirmed that Hong Kong will preserve the advantages of its tax regime in terms of simplicity, certainty, and transparency, and will continue to maintain the territorial source principle of taxation in Hong Kong. Of course, on this point, since Hong Kong is on EU's watch list in relation to its foreign source passive income regime, it is expected that Hong Kong will introduce a set of revised rules on determining the source of passive income, such as interest income and royalty, which will come into effect on 1st of January 2023. As committed to OECD, it is planned that a legislative proposal would be submitted in the second half of 2022 to implement the global minimum tax rate and other relevant requirements in accordance with Pillar 2, which will be effective since 1st January 2023. And to safeguard Hong Kong's taxing rights, the Hong Kong government is also considering to introduce a domestic minimum top-up tax on the affected MNE starting from the year of assessment 2024-25 to ensure that their effective tax rate reach the global minimum effective tax rate of 15%. Overall, It means a lot of work will need to be done given the tight timeline, and we hope the Hong Kong government will launch a public consultation as soon as possible. Meanwhile, it also means a lot of work for MNE to analyze the impact of Pillar 2 and domestic minimum tax with respect to their group structure and operations around the world. As more and more guidance and clarification are provided on the new rules, including the OECD commentary released on this Monday, which contain over 200 pages of commentary and over 50 pages of examples. As I said, more work will need to be done. That's the end of my part, and let me pass the floor back to Polly.
Thank you, Roy, and thanks again, Alfred and Raymond. This brings us to the end of our today's discussion. We still have a few minutes, so let us respond to some of the questions from our audience. Hey, Roy, maybe you need to come back again. We have a question for you. It's related to family office. The question is, would multi-family offices be able to enjoy the new tax exemption? And if this is able to enjoy, what are the conditions that need to be satisfied? Over to you, please, Roy.
Sure. Thank you, Polly. This is a very good question. Indeed, the proposed tax exemption for family office, which I just briefly talked about, would only apply to single family office structure, because there is a requirement that the SFO, which is the entity that provide investment management services to the investment vehicle held by the family office. There's a requirement saying that they cannot provide investment management services to entities other than the FYHV of the same family. So multi-family office structure does not work here. But for multi-family office structure, they may be able to rely on the unified fund exemption regime in Hong Kong, provided certain conditions are satisfied. However, please note that there is an anti-avoidance provision under the unified fund exemption regime, which could apply if a fund is owned 30% or more by a Hong Kong resident. So for multi-family office structure, if there is any Hong Kong families that own 30% or more in the fund vehicle, such anti-avoidance provision could apply to deem the otherwise tax-exempt profits of the fund as taxable in the hands of such Hong Kong family based on their percentage of ownership. So I hope this can answer the audience question.
Okay, thank you, Roy. And we still have a few minutes, so maybe I take another question from the audience. It is related to interest expense of green bond. The question is, if a Hong Kong company issue green bond in Hong Kong, is the related bond interest expense deductible for Hong Kong tax purpose? I would say it could be a complicated question, but I can give you an overview, a general ideas first. Generally speaking, interest expense is deductible in Hong Kong if it is incurred for the production of taxable income here in Hong Kong. But if it is incurred as capital expenditure, it would not be deductible. So whether the interest expense incurred for the green bond is deductible in Hong Kong depends on whether the proceeds can generate taxable income here in Hong Kong. However, please bear in mind that the bond issuer sometimes may not use the proceeds itself and may press the loan to another group company that actually use the proceeds. So the recharge arrangement should be carefully and properly reviewed. As I said, that there will be a lot of tax implication for the recharge arrangement, especially if the recharge is cross-border arrangement, such as the arm's length interest rate, and in particular, if the tax rate in the two jurisdictions are different, any potential transfer pricing issue, what is the withholding tax of interest income in the other jurisdiction, any treaty rate to reduce the withholding tax, etc., should be carefully reviewed, and it could be really quite complicated. And as I said, my advice is to seek professional tax advice in advance to maximize the tax efficiency. I think, unfortunately, it is the time we all have today. So, Alfred, Raymond, and Roy, thanks again for participating in this webcast, and special thanks to all of you who were able to join us today. We would like to encourage you to fill out the short survey that will pop up on your screen shortly and tell us what you think about today's program. If you join us late, please note that this presentation will be archived for future viewing. If you feel that the others would benefit from this webcast, please share the link. Please share our webcast via the share this icon and have them visit the debrief website. We will respond to all of the questions submitted during the after the webcast in a couple of weeks. Also, if you think any other questions or comments later, please feel free to reach out either to me or to our speakers. We'll be more than happy to talk to you. And please don't forget to tune in to our next scheduled webcast from the Corporate Income Tax on 23rd March, titled M&A and Carve-out Strategy in Australia and New Zealand. At last, from all of us at Deloitte, thank you for your participation in Deloitte's Asia Pacific Tax webcast today. Goodbye and have a great day.